webinar, A Moment with McDonald's, examining the connection between organizational design, corporate culture, and sustainability goals. My name is Ann Stockbridge. I'm Director of Operations for CSR Wire, your corporate social responsibility newswire. And we're delighted today to be joining Toronto Sustainability Speaker Series, McDonald's, and Open Spaces Learning in presenting this webinar. Today's presenters will be Bob Langert of McDonald's, Heather Schafter of Open Spaces Learning, Leslie Bennett of Open Spaces Learning, and Brad Zarnett of Toronto Sustainability Speaker Series. A few administrative details. We encourage questions throughout the webinar. The best way to do that is to click on the plus sign next to questions on the control panel, and the text box will open. You can also provide questions through Twitter using the hashtag MCDSUSTY. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording along with the slides are going to be available to you after the presentation. And also, if your questions aren't answered during today's time, please be assured they'll be addressed after the webinar. And now I'll hand this over to Brad Zarnett. Brad?
Thank you, Ann. Hello to everyone, and thank you for being with us today. First, I'd like to personally thank McDonald's CSR Chief, Bob Langert, for joining us today. Back in Toronto a couple of weeks ago, we got to know Bob, and I think I can speak for everybody in Toronto and on the live webcast that Bob was a very big hit, and we were all quite anxious to hear the McDonald's story. I'd also like to thank Leslie and Heather of Open Spaces. I'm sorry?
I was just making a joke. That's because I'm a big guy.
Oh.
Physically.
Yeah, I'm a pretty big guy too, though. So we had very distinguished guests at the event, so it was well received. And I'd also like to thank Leslie and Heather of Open Spaces Learning, who are taking time out of their schedules to provide us with actionable tools to help your organization move from brainstorming to harnessing culture to implementing change. And last but not least, I'd like to thank the amazing team at CSR Wire, Sarah, Ann, and Gabe, for their incredible support in helping to put this together. So if we can move to slide 2, let's just quickly go over the agenda for today. We're going to spend a few minutes with the welcome, summarize the TSSS live event in Toronto, and have Bob reflect on the issues of culture and change. Then we're going to talk about the brainstorming session and the 250 ideas that we came up with at that live event, and hear from Bob what ideas resonated with him and the McDonald's team. Following that, Leslie and Heather will talk about how to move from brainstorming to harnessing culture and implementing change, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A and then some final thoughts and a wrap-up. So let's move to the next slide. So I just want to bring a little context to how we all came to be here today. 2 weeks ago, we had the event in Toronto. We were joined by Bob Langert and Richard Ellis to explore ideas around transparent and authentic communication. It was a packed house, and it was a very interesting event to hear from a company that we all think we know so well in McDonald's. We have an event summary on our website at tsss.ca, and that'll be in the next screen. You can link to it. But I'm just going to take a very quick moment to talk about the main themes that emerged from the event. A quick sentence for each. We talked about, so if we go to the next slide, we talked about moving from fear of change to opportunity. We talked about partnerships for positive change. We talked about Greenpeace and environmental defense. And we talked about the importance of building a genuine connection, both internally and externally. But rather than have me repeat what happened at the event, for those who are interested, again, the event summary will be on the next screen, and I encourage you to read it. I thought I'd ask Bob a few questions and have Bob tell us some more pointed ideas that have come up in subsequent conversations. So Bob, I'm going to give you a good hard question to start, and here it is. So how do you personally wrestle with your desire to do more good when the current business paradigm doesn't allow you to engage in projects that have no clear or immediate business case, even if you feel very strongly that it's the right thing to do?
All right, nothing like starting off with a soft question. Well, first, hey, I love being in Toronto for the event. I thought it was spectacular. We had a lot of fun and enjoyment, and I look forward to our discussion here. Really welcome everything you're doing. I love the people that you're connecting with. The boy, you know, wrestle is an interesting term as you ask that question. I find that, you know, our whole philosophy is shifting at McDonald's, as with many companies, this whole idea of orientating our work on corporate social responsibility and sustainability around shared value. If you think in terms of the shared value model, which I'm a big believer in, and this is something that we're formulating within McDonald's way more strategically, the idea that we want to work on what matters most in society, along with what matters most to drive our business forward. So imagine these two intersecting circles, and we're trying to identify the most impactful things that we can help society with, i.e. the right thing to do, with those things that drive our business forward. Now, by the way, that list in the middle of where we can make a big difference and things that help our business is a pretty big list. So I have to be honest with you, Brad, that if I spend my time wrestling with the things that we can't do, I think I'd go batty. Because sure, there's always a long list of things you can do, things that fit into the business maybe today, maybe things that don't fit into the business today. But I think we have a good enough list of things we're working on that make a difference to society, whether that's, for instance, energy. I think energy is our #1 environmental impact in our business. You know, a lot of people would say packaging is, but energy really is. I mean, by the way, we spend $2 billion on energy for McDonald's. That's our annual energy bill. And I'd say it's the most important thing we can do environmentally to better the world is to reduce our greenhouse gas emission footprint by our use of energy. It's one of the best things we can do to become a more efficient business as well. So I get a lot of pleasure by advancing that forward, and I just try not to dwell on those things that just don't fit in right now. I think down the road, these are things to keep an eye on. You know, we always want to do the right thing, but you got to be focused. In a company like ours, we're a big system. Your list of things you work on to advance the company cannot be a big list, because you're not going to get them done.
And on a personal level, if you tried to push beyond what the company was able to digest, what would that do to the effectiveness that you could bring to the table to drive change?
Could you repeat that question again, Brad?
If you tried to push beyond what the company culturally was prepared to go forward with, if you had a particular initiative that you wanted to bring forth, but your colleagues didn't necessarily mesh with your ideals or your way of thinking, I'd just like you to talk about your pragmatism and what would happen to your ability to be an effective change maker if you push too hard in areas that the company wasn't ready for.
Yeah, I think the idea of being a CSR leader in a company is to be a change agent. So you're so right in all of that. But part of being a change agent, I believe, is you have to be like a orchestra leader. You know, so an orchestra leader creates beautiful music and a beautiful experience by working with a lot of people to find common ground, to find harmony, to create beautiful music. That's how I'd look at a job like mine, or others that do the same thing. That if you're only pushing things that go counter to the culture, counter to what's really fitting into the business, you have a big chance of being isolated in your business, and you're not going to have respect, nor authority, nor people aren't going to listen to you. You know, people are going to listen to you when your arguments within the company are arguments that can relate to what they're going through and what our leaders are going through. And if you come through with things that just don't fit in, I think you're going to lose your your ability to change. So it's a balancing act because you don't want to be a dead weight in the company and have the status quo. We are not here. I'm not here to have the status quo in the company. I want our company to be a leader on CSR and sustainability. Period. What's going to move the needle? So everything I think about in terms of being that orchestra conductor is how can I move pieces and be influential in my company to make a difference. And there is a balancing act that if you push too hard on the wrong things, you actually do more harm than good.
Exactly. So another quick question about culture, because it's vital to a company's ability to move any initiative forward, whether it's sustainability or anything. So how would you describe how McDonald's culture has helped or hindered your drive to affect change?
Well, I'll start out with the help side first. I got a good list for the hindered side as well. I've been with McDonald's 30 years, so obviously I love our company, and part of the reason I'm still here is it's a culture that I love. And what is our culture? You know, we were founded by Ray Kroc back in 1955 as one of our guiding principles was to be in tune with the community, to give back to the community, to have high integrity. And believe it or not, we still have handshake agreements with our suppliers. So trust, handshake agreements, integrity, giving back, these are values that set up our company since day one that I really enjoy. And so having this culture that is like this, I have tailwinds behind me. So those are terrific cultural tailwinds that make my work a little bit easier to push because I'm not pushing them against the grain. I'm going with the grain. Now, in terms of the hindrance, I'd like to know a more democratic company culture than McDonald's. And what I mean by that, we truly are a democratic culture. And what happens in democracy? Sometimes you get chaos. Right. Because everybody has a voice. Everybody has an opinion. We're very entrepreneurial. By the way, 85% of our 34,000 restaurants around the world are owned by independent business people that are presidents and CEOs of their restaurant operation, whether that's 1, 3, or 5 restaurants. I mean, the average might be 3 to 5 restaurants. They have a huge voice in what goes on. Our suppliers, we call it a three-legged stool of suppliers, owner, operators, and company people, all having a co-equal voice in advancing the company. Now, I believe that's a strength of our company and what makes us strong and growing. However, it can hinder things when things are so decentralized, everybody has a voice, everybody's empowered to make a difference. To get decisions made, to get global alignment within our company for a stance that we take around the world is a tough task. But it's a rewarding task, and you got to pick and choose your spots to take a stand on that.
Is there a voice at McDonald's that can move indecision towards more consensus when it's necessary? Is there somebody who can stand up and make things happen when there seems to be some molasses in the decision-making process?
Oh, I think we have some, I guess in any democratic institution, and I guess I'm comparing us to a kind of a democratic type organization. We have committees and councils. By the way, we have a global sustainability board made up of 15 high officer leaders of the company that I would say is one of our primary voices. We're these 15 people that are functional leaders, are people that head up HR, supply chain, and legal and communications and operations, and also from what we call the areas of the world, from Europe, Asia, Latin America, Canada, North America. This board, filters through what we should stand for, what our strategy should be, what the goals and targets should be. And we have other mechanisms. So we're not lacking voices, we're not lacking governance, but given that we have a lot of freedom within our company, I enjoy it. I enjoy the culture because we have robust internal debates, which I think is healthy, so that when at the end of the day when we announce something that goes public, you can rest assured there's been lots of internal discussion to get alignment to get there.
Right. So it's been thoroughly vetted before it comes to the public's attention.
Yeah, we just made a big announcement a couple weeks ago with the Alliance for a Healthier Generation and the Clinton Global Initiative, over things that we're doing with nutrition. And nutrition is an important issue. It's an important pillar. We have 5 pillars of CSR and sustainability, and food and nutrition is one of the biggest pillars, and I would say the most important pillar, because it's the food we serve. And so I was very happy about this announcement we made about more commitment to side salads and milk and fruit and vegetables for kids, etc. So that's just an example. There's a lot of work that went behind the scenes to make that happen.
Right. And based on our conversation earlier, there's no intention of switching to a 100% vegetarian diet or offering at McDonald's anytime soon. It would
let me just say this for that, Brad. I love Ray Kroc, who said, I think he said this back in the early 60s, when who knows where our company, did he have a vision that we'd be what we are today back in the early 60s? I don't know that he did. But he said, I don't know what we're going to sell in the year 2000, right, but whatever it is, it's going to be a lot of it.
Right.
And by the way, that's our business model.
Right.
We serve food, really good food in a really good, clean environment that's safe. People are happy at a value. So, why couldn't we serve? Why can't we? And we are serving more choices along those lines, more so than ever before. And who knows, what
right,
we can be serving down the road. So I wouldn't put it past us that if the consumer wants it, but we're not going to be a niche restaurant. We're a big restaurant that serves things in larger volumes.
Right. Okay. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk a little about the brainstorming session at the live event, where we asked the audience to come up with ideas on how to be more effective at communicating transparency and authenticity with your customer. So that list, if you go to the next slide, is available on our website, and we encourage you to have a look at it. There's a really smart community here in Toronto, and we had some really interesting ideas. And at the end of the webinar, we're going to announce the winning team and the idea and their prize. But now I'd like to just ask Bob quickly, what ideas regarding authentic communication and transparency, if any, were sparked for you during the conversation and the long list that we presented to you? Does anything resonate with you that came up in that conversation?
Well, absolutely. It was absolutely fascinating to look through that list and also kind of compare it with our own internal list of what we're trying to do to try to break through. When I say break through, I would say one of our biggest deficiencies in our company is just getting more people to understand, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and some of our progress. And it's a challenge for us for many, many reasons. So as I was looking through the list, I came up with 4 kind of broad categories that intrigued me. One was there was a bunch of ideas related to basically leveraging social media more. I think we're here at McDonald's, we're kind of at the beginning stages of how to leverage that more when it comes to CSR and sustainability. So I was intrigued with a series of different ideas, including crowdsourcing. So for instance, we haven't done anything in crowdsourcing. I've done one Twitter chat, I think, last year. I just think we are like so much just at the very surface of what we should be doing in that space. The reason that this intrigues me, since I've been around for 30 years, and I've been around to our suppliers, I've been around to our restaurants and training facilities, and I feel like I've seen the inside of McDonald's. And my wish and dream is I just wish everybody could see what I see every day. So I believe the more transparent we are, if we could just transmit kind of what I see, that I think it's pretty good stuff. Hey, are we perfect? No. A lot more do, yes. but you're doing a lot of good work. I think a second category, and this is another category we're just touching the surface, a lot of ideas came forth on engaging with our internal people. This is a real challenge for us. You'd think a company like ours would probably have how we communicate to our people in our restaurants kind of down pat. We don't. You know, we're in 119 countries. We're rolling out a whole new framework on CSR and sustainability early next year, and getting people to understand this around the world with all these different cultures and business units is a challenge. So that's top of mind for us. A third bucket was supply chain transparency. You know, where does our food come from? A lot of talk about meat and beef, and I can tell you that that really resonates with me, because what I've seen is probably the biggest trend over the last 5 or 7 years in measuring where the consumer is at. That the number one trend is they really want to know where their food comes from. You know, where was it sourced? Why was it sourced there? What were the ethical practices? How was it processed, et cetera? So I think the more we can do in that area, and we're not doing much in it. You know, so I think all those 3 areas are ripe with opportunity. There's a fourth one that was just a singular idea by somebody, those 250 ideas that I thought was really intriguing. It was something like have an outside group write a report about what we're doing. You know,
right.
To me, I interpreted that as an independent report, come in, take a look, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever it is, and have that be available. So that intrigued me.
Right.
It intrigued me because I don't know, when McDonald's says we do something, I'm not convinced everybody believes us. So it'd be interesting to have somebody come in and get a different point of view, both for how our internal people view what we're doing, but also for the external audience. So anyway, that's my quick summary, Brad.
Okay. Well, I think certainly having an impartial third party offers every company a chance to be more believable. And in terms of your ability to bring all the customers in to McDonald's to see what you do, maybe we'll have to furnish you with one of those head cameras that the skydivers use, and you can just walk around and everybody can see what you see. So maybe it's not as far-fetched as at first you might think. So what I'd like to do now is I want to ask you well, I think what we're going to do is we're going to move to our next slide, and I'm going to pass the baton over to begin our next segment. And I'd like to introduce our corporate culture game changers, Leslie Bennett and Heather Shafter of Open Spaces Learning. And they're going to reveal the latest tool on how to get from brainstorming to harnessing culture and implementing change. And I'll pass it over to you guys.
Great, thanks Brad. It's Heather Shafter, so I'll kick it off. So Open Spaces Learning, we're delighted to be with you this afternoon with everybody. And we just heard from Bob some of the great ideas that did get generated from the live event on October 9th. Some of those who participated, you might have seen, gosh, you know, I think we can even implement some of those ideas in our own organization. Or you might have completely different sustainability ideas and strategies that you would so love to have take root, and you just haven't been successful to date. So we're going to first let you know that we're going to ask you to participate in a poll in a minute. So move to the edge of your seat and get ready for that. And we'll also tell you now that what we want to accomplish in our next piece is we're going to give you 2 tools, and these are culture tools, really building on, Bob, your insights around the really catalytic role that culture can play in empowering sustainability strategies. So we're going to give you 2 tools this afternoon, and these are tools that they're practical but really powerful, so you can take those sustainability ideas and really turn them into action. And so I'll go ahead and ask, and if you could put up the poll, we have a question for you. Our question is around, when we look at organizational strategies that can include any kind, including your sustainability strategies, what percentage of organizational strategies do you think fail? And all you need to do to participate in the poll is simply move your cursor and just click on one of those percentages. and Anne from CSR Wire will take her calculator out, just kidding, and calculate the answers. And we'll give you a few seconds for that. So what percentage of all organization strategies fail? Again, this is regardless of the kind of organizational strategy, human resources, sustainability, IT, doesn't matter how much resources, what's actually thrown at the strategy to have it succeed. So Anne, I think we can close the poll, and Anne is going to let us know. Great, so let's see. So the majority of you, okay, split between 50% of organizational strategies fail and 70% of organizational strategies fail. Okay, great, so very close. So next slide, Anne. So what the research has shown is it's quite a high percentage. So it's actually 70% of all organizational strategies fail. And our strategic partners, they're called Culture Sync in the U.S., they got really interested in, well, why would there be such a high percentage that fail? Clearly, a bunch of smart people are at work at designing and implementing these strategies. So what Culture Sync did was they did 8 years of research with 24,000 people in 24 organizations to study this. And they found that the one underlying common factor that contributed to the failure of strategies was culture. So otherwise said, you know, that if a culture didn't pull for the success of that strategy, there's a 70% chance that it was going to fail. And as Bob is speaking, we can hear that that's certainly similar in the case of McDonald's. Next slide. So we'll say this another way now. If we flip it around to, well, when you're looking at your sustainability strategy or idea, well, the missing link to having that perform highly is going to be a culture that pulls for it. And, you know, some people find it surprising, but it ends up really not being the success of the leader of a company or a department, but it's really the function of the culture of the tribes. And tribes we're simply referring to as the naturally forming groups in any organization, and the research showed is a very particular size, it's 20 to 150. If the culture of those groups pull for strategy, there's a very good chance it's going to succeed. And the research showed that culture is really an uncharted gold mine for that kind of performance improvement of your strategies. So what we want to do next then is really give you the secret sauce, if you will, is how can you then leverage the organizational strategy, or excuse me, organizational culture of those around you to have your sustainability strategy soar. So I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Bennett now, my colleague, and she's going to tell you for this first tool exactly what do you need so that you can take the first step in having your sustainability strategy have it take root. Leslie?
Great, thank you, Heather. So we're going to, if we can go to the next slide, we're going to take you through this graph. It's a bar graph that actually comes from the research. So as they did the research, they started seeing that in any organization, 5 stages of organizational culture would show up. And the organizational culture, as defined by the tribal leadership model, which is the model we're using, really looks at 3 things. It looks at the language that individuals use to speak. It looks at the behaviors that they take. And it also looks at how do people form themselves in relationship. What's the structure of relationship do people have? So this graph shows you the percentages of those stages in any organization. So we're going to go through them fairly quickly. And as we're going through this, be thinking from where can I see this happening in my own organization? What stages are around me in my own organization? We're actually going to have you map this on to either your team or your organization in a couple of minutes so you can be thinking from there. And it's really the first tool that we're offering you that will give you the ability to have your sustainability strategies be really successful. Okay, so the first stage, stage 1, we talk about it as 2% of any population. Stage 1 is really something that you would find in prisons or in gangs. So the language here that's being used is life sucks. The nature of relationships here are people are alienated. It's just undermining behavior that they're taking. One of the things that's happening is they are thinking life is unfair, so anything is permissible. Really, the rules don't apply to me. Again, only 2% of it within the population, and this is unlikely to be found in organizations, although it does happen very rarely. Let's move to stage 2. So stage 2, 25% of the population in an organization can fall into this stage. The language here that's being used is my life sucks. So it goes from the life sucks to my life sucks. And the nature of relationships here, people are actually very separate from each other, although they might feel like they're inside a group. They're not actually in relationship with people. The behavior here is people are they're passive aggressive. They are very resigned. They feel like they're a victim of their circumstance. And where you might see this stage show up in an organization is if you think about a government organization where folks are really just there to, punch the clock 9 to 5 and make it to that retirement age so that they can stop working. They're not interested in putting any additional effort in. Let's move to stage 3, 49% of the organization can fall into this stage. This is obviously the majority. Here the language being used is I'm great, and what people aren't saying is and you're not. Individuals in stage 3 are using the I, me, my language, and when we're in a relationship in stage 3, it's a very hub and spoke type structure. So I would be in relationship with Heather, I would be in a relationship with Brad, I would be in a relationship with Bob, but I wouldn't want the 3 of them to be in relationship. I would want to be in control. The behavior here is one of high-performing individuals, so this is probably very familiar to lots of people. But in this stage, what's happening is we're actually hoarding information because we think that knowledge is power. And our only interest is to move up and to be great, the whole I'm great. There's a complaint that we have in stage 3 that sounds like I don't have enough time and I don't have enough support around me. So an example of stage 3, certainly it can be found in many organizations, and one that's really highlighted, you can see it in the real estate industry where individuals are working on their own, they're high performing, but they're not operating inside of a team environment. Stage 4, this is 22% of organizations, and the language here goes from I to we. So they're saying we're great, and what they're not saying is, and they're not. So they might be talking about another department. They might be saying we're great in our department, another one is not. Or they might even be saying our competitors are not, so as an organization. If you asked a manager, if you talked to a manager and said, you did really great on that project, the manager would say, yes, my team did really great. So the acknowledgement goes to the team, the we, the our. The nature of relationships here, we talk about them as stable partnerships or triads. So this goes from that hub and spoke formation to something that we call a triad, which looks like a triangle, and 3 people are really together and supporting each other. Behaviors here in stage 4, what you'll find is the groups are actually making decisions from shared values. So it's not based on a circumstance that's happening, but it's actually the shared value that's making the decision for them. The biggest complaint here in stage 4 is really finding enough collaborative individuals to bring into existing groups to work on the projects or the projects that they're working on. So that's stage 4. Stage 5, the final stage, let me give you an example of stage 4 organizations. So in Canada, if you were to look at WestJet, certainly an organization that operates at stage 4. And one of the most famous organizations that comes out as the stage 4 organization is the Zappos organization. Two really great examples of where stage 4 is living and breathing there. So stage 5, 2% of population falls into this group in any organization. This is going from we're great to now life's great. And they're still speaking from the we, are, and team. The nature of the relationships here are no longer just 3-person triads, but multiple triads across different sectors, across different organizations. Behaviors here are teams are becoming focused around a history-making project. So you could think of organizations that come together, could be competitors, that actually are doing the work around beating cancer. The biggest complaint here is there's so much to do, what should we do next? Now when we talked about the 70% of business strategies failing, what the research was showing was those that fell into that high-performing group where strategies were actually being successful were those that were in stage 4 and stage 5. So we'll move to the next slide. Thank you. So this now is a cultural map. It's now in a different format, but it still gives you the same information. And I just want to highlight that structure column there. So you can actually see now what it looks like to be in a relationship in each of those stages. So you've just heard the overview of the 5 cultural stages. And if you want to have the sustainability strategies really thrive, as I suggested earlier, those that have any of their strategies thriving are in stage 4 and stage 5. This is the first tool in assessing the cultural stage of those individuals around you, those individuals with whom you work, and you actually want to be implementing those sustainability initiatives. So we're going to do another poll. And as I suggested earlier, hopefully you were listening from, where have I seen these stages show up? What does it look like around me in my own organization? So the poll that we're going to do right now is what stage, so you want to just pick one, does your organization or team, and remember those are groups of 20 to 150, primarily fall into? So the poll is going to come up on your screen. Here again, all you need to do is use your cursor to pick any one of those stages. And you're really just looking from, based on the 5 cultural stages that we just spoke about, what is the cultural stage that your organization or team primarily falls into? If you want to take a couple of minutes now just to make that choice. And of course this is anonymous, so don't worry, you can give us the truth, that would be great. So here's the thing about the cultural work that we do. What we know is that effective leaders can hear and assess what stage their colleagues are at. And this again is the first tool in identifying and supporting having your sustainability strategies really thrive. So we'll give you just a couple more minutes to fill this out. And let's see where we are. We'll see if it maps on to the research percentages. And why don't we take a look at the answers now? Thank you, Anne. We'll go to that. Great, good. So as you can see, it's very similar to that bar chart that we just showed you in the slide before. Stage 1, we have 0%, fantastic, I'm so happy to hear that. Stage 5, 0%, and that's okay. One of the things I didn't say about stage 5 was really organizations have a challenge staying at stage 5. It's really that stage 4 where you can be really stable and effective. So folks will move to stage 5 to do a project and then move back to stage 4. So this is great. Stage 2, 13%, stage 3, 48%, stage 4, 40%. So we're going to give you a tool in just a moment, but we're going to base it on the results of this poll that we just did. I'm going to hand this over to Heather, and she can talk about that.
Great. Thanks, Leslie. So it's Heather. So to recap, what we're saying then is the first tool is really assessing for the people around you, the people that are going to be your key partners inside or outside your organization, what organizational stage do they fall into? We first need to know that, because if we're speaking to them from, for example, if they're stage 2 and you're speaking to them from stage 4, you can actually only hear one stage up. So it's one of the biggest pieces of feedback our clients give us is they in the past have been speaking from a stage 4 vision and values and sustainability to stage 2, and stage 2 they just can't hear that. So really critical is that first tool, really get where are people coming from before you start communicating. So that's tool 1. So the second tool is now, okay, great, I know where they're coming from. You're telling me we can only upgrade them one stage at a time. Great. Now give me a tool that can have us upgrade them. So the second tool is around upgrading people from one stage to the next until they're at that highest performing stages 4 and 5 where your sustainability strategies will thrive. So we'll go to the next slide. Great. So we'll just give you the upgrade tools for stage 3, but you can see the summary, and we have many other tools that are really effective at leveraging from stage to stage, but we'll highlight now leveraging from stage 3 to 4, given that's where the majority of people on the webinar found those around them. So if you're finding the folks around you are at a stage 3, I'm great, then 1 or 2 ways you can upgrade that culture is work with the group to have them identify their group shared values. And these might not be those values that are hanging on the wall in the reception area. You want to actually have them go through this exercise, identify the shared values of the group, and then have them start making decisions from there. And then secondly, have them start building multi-person projects, which spills over to this mentorship tool. So the mentorship tool, you can mentor people by having them form groups of 3 and have them identify a project that is really exciting and inspiring for them, that they see, well, holy gosh, like I just cannot do this on my own. I actually have to collaborate in a really effective way with those around me and get the attention off myself. So our invitation to you then is to take this second tool and go out and try it. So if you're stage 3 moving to stage 4, do that. And otherwise, if you were one of the ones that found your people around you at the other stages, please go ahead and try these other tools, these other upgrade tips that we have here in the chart. So that really wraps up our piece around identifying first where are the people around you organizationally as a culture, and then what are some ways that you can then upgrade them to that higher performing stage 4 and 5. So that's where your sustainability strategies will really take root, and you'll see success that you thought was completely impossible before. And what I'll do is bring us back for a moment to the ideas that got generated out of the October 9th live event, and linking this to the prize that we promised. As was said, there was just a ton of rich ideas that got developed that night. So what we have picked as the winning idea is around really having McDonald's tell us, like the world, share with us how are you engaging, how's McDonald engaging their employees, getting feedback from their employees, and Bob has spoken to the challenge of that, but really looking at and sharing with us how employees could be the biggest and most effective ambassadors in culture and in sustainability initiatives. And the group that came up with that idea includes Jenna Feldman, James Gray Donald, Jeff Lung, David Rawlinson, and Wesley Gee. We'll contact all of you, and if you're on the call, congratulations. We're offering you a free cultural assessment for each of your teams, organizations, and that has a value of $5,000 each. So thank you, and I think now we'll turn it back to Leslie, who's going to now be fielding some questions for both Bob and then for ourselves on the culture piece that we just shared with you.
Great, thank you, Heather. So we've had a couple of questions come in, so thank you so much. And if you have more questions, feel free to just write them in your chat bar there, and we'll try and get them answered. Let's start with the first one. So this is for you, Bob. The question is, it comes from Jeff Smith. Thanks, Jeff, for submitting the question. Is there any timeline being discussed for McDonald's moving to carbon-free energy?
We're going to be putting out some goals and targets with some timelines early next year related across the 5 pillars of sustainability. So when it comes to climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, being carbon-free, you're going to see elements of that in our work as we talk about it more in the future. You're going to see that we're setting goals for reducing our energy consumption. I already alluded to that, how important that is within our restaurants. And then also we have a vision of buying verified sustainable food and paper. And a big part of that, including beef and meat and all the things we buy, we have 6 priorities right now, leading with beef. And as you know, the carbon footprint of meat is very important, and it's an area that we feel we can work with many in the value chain to make a difference on. The zero goal is not in the works, you know. So I think that's something that we can aspire to. Our plan is going to set more time-bound goals that can get us on a way to reduce our carbon footprint in a significant way.
That's great, great, thank you. So how about this? We have another one from Erin Emery, I hope I said that right. So this is for Bob. In culture of a democratic voice, how do you go from being aggressive in sharing best practices from these voices around the world to, I'm thinking about McDonald's and I've seen around, I'm thinking about McDonald's I've seen around Asia where they go to really great lengths to compost, recycle, etc.
I'm trying to interpret the question. So I guess the question is, how can we spread some of these best practices more aggressively? Is that how the question is, Ann?
I think, yeah, I think so. And inside of the democratic voice culture that you have.
I think the best way we can do that, and what we try to do internally, is create the spirit of call it competition. We call our work within everything we do at the corporate center is led by freedom within a framework. So we don't prescribe a lot of tactical things, but what we do prescribe is more the strategy, the philosophy, the ethics, and the principles, and how different business units go about reducing energy, recycling more, providing more food choices. A lot of that is very dependent on the individual country markets and their infrastructure. But if we provide measurements, I would say that's a key part of the answer, Erin, is we are now making it a very visible part of countries making plans, that they plan and account for this, that we're creating measurements and key performance indicators. And but we're letting the freedom as to how they go about reducing waste, for example. We're not going to tell them how to do it, but there's plenty of ways to do it around the world, and kind of create an internal culture where it's part of the job, it's part of the planning, it's part of the accountability and measurement.
Oh, that's great, thanks. We just had another question for you, Bob, from David Katz. It says, do you use the carbon disclosure or the global reporting programs? And maybe you can let us know if one or the other is, why you decided on one or the other.
Well,
what your experience is.
We do provide a full set of responses to the Carbon Disclosure Project. We think the work we're doing is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I think our answer right now might be kept more in a non-public file, but I think what we want to do is definitely be more transparent about the work we're doing there. So we're going to continue to provide more disclosure. Our next CSR report that we're going to put out in the first quarter of next year, you're going to see a lot of disclosure on issues related to carbon and greenhouse gas emissions. So I think I would love to have all the listeners review our report when it comes out in the first quarter, and please contact me with your opinion on how we think we're taking a pretty proactive, aggressive stance on more disclosure on greenhouse gas emissions. Be curious if we meet the listeners' mark on that. We're a big believer in the global reporting initiative, GRI. We use that as a framework for how we do our reporting, and we try to do as much as we can to meet the different criteria and standards that they have for our business.
Great. So we have a couple of more. Just looking at the time, I think we can probably take one or two. So let's look at this one. This says, since social media is increasingly becoming a GD platform for building stakeholder community, how crucial will it be in helping to build a corporate culture?
Well, I know it's going to be crucial. You know, just to give you an example of that, our company just hired a chief digital officer. We made that announcement about 2 weeks ago. And this chief digital officer comes from Silicon Valley. And I looked at his resume and go, wow, this is a very unique leader we're bringing into our company that we're going to try to bring through a lot of change. Boy, I don't even know what's going to, I can take a look at the past and how social media has changed our world in the last 10, 20 years. I have a feeling it's just the tip of the iceberg. So I think the question is right on. We've got to do a lot more to develop ways that we can leverage it for CSR and sustainability. I think the CSR sustainability space is like perfect for us to be leaders. I speak within my company, but even my non-McDonald's hat, people in this area, we should be using every way we can to be very modern and relevant with all the social media devices. Because the world demands transparency. We have means to do it so now. I mean, I've been around long enough to know what it's like to live in a non-transparent world. And life was very simple that way 25 years ago, by the way. But I enjoy this much more. And because the opportunity is just enormous, and we need to go after it.
Yeah, good. It's so crucial, and you know, even with the generations coming in, it's the expectation is there for it as well. So it will be interesting how it all unfolds. So I think I'm going to hand this back over to Brad and let him close it up and give us a recap, and just if there's anything else. Brad, why don't you go for it?
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks for that great presentation on culture. I think it's interesting to think about how somebody in a prison might communicate with somebody who's in stage 4, and then you begin to really understand how you have to understand someone else's worldview in order to have effective communication with them. And if you don't, you're going to get a lot of blank stares, and nobody likes a blank stare. So how much time do we have left?
Well, on the clock, yeah, on the clock we have, so it's 5 minutes to 2 right now, or to the top of the hour, and we thought we might go to about 10 after if it's needed. We have about 15 minutes still.
So, Bob, I'd like to ask you a question based on a previous conversation we had. And it's interesting that we talk about sustainability and we talk about a triple bottom line, people, planet, and profit. And there's a question that I keep seeing in my research about companies, McDonald's being one of them, and that is on the issue of wages, and nobody brought it up, so I wanted to give Bob a chance to address this. The question is, with regard to wages, clearly it's a difficult business case to make the case that McDonald's should raise the wages of its workers. And as it falls into the realm of sustainability, I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this issue and how McDonald's wrestles with it.
Well, I guess this would be an area where I'd love to have that little headset that you referred to and show the world that I know. And when I go over to see some of the students, by the way, we have 7 hamburger universities around the world, which it's a world-class, training facility. We have one here in our Oak Brook campus, just across the way from where I work, and I'll go over there to meet some of the students, and all these people, started out as entry-level workers, many of them with a lower set of skills, and we're a company that spends a lot of money on training and developing our people. People run our business, and the way that I would come about that question is that I just see the tremendous opportunity that McDonald's provides for people that enter the workforce. Now, we don't consider ourselves a minimum wage employer, but obviously people start at a lower wage level. The question is, where are they going to be 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the road? And all I can tell you is that you ought to see the people that have made their way up the chain of command within McDonald's, whether that's in an individual restaurant, from being a swing manager to the store manager to a supervisor, a district manager, et cetera. And I think, versus this being a negative issue, I turned around to be a positive issue for us, because especially within the restaurant business, most restaurants are mom and pop operations in which you go into them, where is your opportunity to grow within a company? McDonald's has lots of opportunity, and it's proven by thousands upon thousands of people that move on and do wonderful things in our company, and also, gain some skills that they can take elsewhere, because people, we employ part-time people that are on the move, work for us in a temporary way, and they move on to something else, and I think we provide value there. So I think there's a big picture here that I would address, that it's not only about the beginning wages, but it's more about opportunity and how they develop and all the things that they can get in a company like ours, which I think are there, they're tangible, and they're real.
I think that's a perfect ending for bringing us full circle, because at the live event, and one of the themes that comes up in conversation with you is that the whole realm of sustainability is tremendous, and it's a tremendous opportunity. And moving from fear to opportunity is the way McDonald's approaches many of the challenges that lie ahead. Certainly that wage issue will become an issue that has to be addressed, and that's going to be formulated over time. So it'll be interesting to hear further conversations about it. So at this point, I would just like to say 2 points. For anybody who is interested, TSSS has another event at the end of November, and we're going to bring out one of Ontario's most sustainable vineyards to talk about wine, organic wine, and how they differentiate themselves in the marketplace, how they impact communities. It should be a really interesting event, so we're quite excited about that. And the other thing is, TSSS, in partnership with a gentleman in the UK from Earthshine Solutions, has released a paper on Capitalism 2.0, and we'd love to share it with you. If you're interested, you can find it on our website. At this point, I just want to say thank you so much to everybody involved. Bob, you've been incredible in sharing your journey with us at the live event, with us during this webinar. So thank you very much for your time and to share your journey and your story. I'd also like to thank Heather and Leslie for bringing some great insight and practical skills on how to move culture towards a more strategic outcome, what pitfalls to avoid, and it's really the backbone of any company, and the culture allowing innovation to move forward. And finally, I'd like to thank the folks at CSR Wire. They are fabulous. I encourage everybody to read everything that comes out from CSR Wire because it is fantastic stuff. And yeah, thank you to everyone, and let's hope for a sustainable future.